Alright, if you spent any amount of time in the Mega Man community, I'm pretty sure you've seen this debate come up numerous times. Who is better, X or Zero, X versus Zero, yada yada yada. It's a question that's been asked a lot for decades. You've probably seen it in YouTube comments. Maybe you've argued about it with your friends. And it's possible that you may even have your mind changed over the years. Some fans love X because he's the original hero of a Reploid era. A hero that believes that there's always another way. Others love Zero because of his incredible combat skills, unforgettable design, and one of the more emotional journeys in gaming. On the surface, it seems like a pretty simple question. Who's the better protagonist? Who is more iconic? Who is the face of the X era? But over the years, I think that we've been asking the wrong question here. Because the more that I play these games, X series, Zero series, even ZX, the more I revisit their stories, the more I see the community celebrate both of these characters decades later, the more that I realize something. X and Zero were never designed to compete with one another. They were designed to complete one another. And once you begin looking at this series through that lens, something remarkable happens. You stop comparing them and you start appreciating why the Mega Man franchise wouldn't be the same without either one of them. That's what this video is about. This isn't a who would win discussion. This isn't an attempt to convince you that your character is wrong. Instead, I want to explore why X and Zero carry equal weight. Not because people think they look alike or they fight alike or they even think alike, but because they represent two completely different ideals that define the heart of Mega Man. We'll look at how their personalities shape the stories they're a part of, how their gameplay reflects who they are as characters, how their partnership became one of gaming's greatest heroic duos, why fans continue celebrating them after their debut, and why, if you're completely new to Mega Man, experiencing both of their journeys might be one of the most rewarding adventures in gaming. Because whether you see yourself in X's hope or Zero's determination, the truth is you need both to truly understand why this franchise has endured for nearly 4 decades. So let's go back to where it all began. Not with a rivalry, but with two heroes whose destinies would become forever intertwined. As we rewind to the beginning of the X era, it's worth remembering something that can be easy to forget today. When Mega Man X released, Capcom wasn't just making another sequel. They were asking players to leave behind one of gaming's most recognizable heroes and step into a brand new generation. That wasn't a small decision. For years, classic Mega Man had become synonymous with precision platforming, colorful robot masters, and the timeless battle between good and evil. He represented optimism, perseverance, and the belief that doing the right thing mattered. So when players booted up Mega Man X for the first time, they weren't simply meeting a new protagonist. They were meeting the future. The first thing many players noticed wasn't the gameplay. It was the feeling. The world looked older. The stakes felt higher. The environments were harsher, the music carried a sense of urgency. Everything suggested that time had moved on, and standing at the center of that new world was X. At first glance, X feels familiar. His blue armor immediately reminds longtime fans of the original Mega Man, creating a bridge between the past and the future. But it doesn't take long to realize that X isn't just a redesigned version of the hero who came before him. He's something entirely new. Unlike the original Mega Man, X was created with the freedom to think for himself. He questions, he doubts, he feels compassion, he struggles with the consequences of violence. He's not driven by programming alone, he's guided by conscience. That single idea changes everything. Instead of asking, can the hero win? The games begin asking, what kind of person chooses to fight when peace is what they truly want? For many players, that made X feel remarkably human. Even though he was a Reploid, his internal conflict mirrored something deeply relatable. He wasn't fearless. He wasn't perfect. He simply chose to keep moving forward despite uncertainty. Then, Zero entered the screen. It's hard to overstate the impact Zero had on players in those early moments. Before you even know his story, he commands attention. The crimson armor, the flowing blonde hair, the green energy saber, the confidence, everything about his design communicates one thing. This character is extraordinary. Where X appears thoughtful and reserved, Zero walks into danger with absolute conviction. He doesn't need lengthy speeches to leave an impression. His actions speak for him. One of the most memorable moments in the opening stages of Mega Man X isn't about defeating a boss. It's the moment Zero arrives when X can't overcome an enemy on his own. In just a few seconds, players understand exactly who he is. Powerful, experienced, dependable. Someone who inspires confidence simply by just showing up. That first impression stayed with an entire generation of players. But here's what makes Capcom's character design so brilliant. If X had been paired with another calm, thoughtful hero, the contrast would have been lost. If Zero had been surrounded only by characters as aggressive as he was, he wouldn't have stood out nearly as much. Instead, the two heroes were intentionally designed to complement one another. Blue and red, ranged combat and close combat, reflection and action, hope and determination. Neither character exists to diminish the other. Their differences are exactly what make each of them unforgettable. That's why, decades later, fans still gravitate toward one or the other. Some people see themselves in X's quiet compassion. Others connect with Zero's unwavering resolve. Neither choice is wrong. In fact, that's one of the greatest strengths of the franchise. It recognizes that heroism doesn't come in just one form. Sometimes heroism means searching for peace even when conflict seems unavoidable. Other times, heroism means stepping forward without hesitation because someone else needs you. Both paths require courage. Both demand sacrifice. And together, they laid the foundation for one of the most beloved partnerships in gaming history. As the X series continued, these first impressions would evolve into something much deeper, because once we understand who these heroes appear to be, the next question becomes even more interesting. Who are they beneath the armor? When people talk about X and Zero, the conversation usually starts with what they do. X shoots. Zero slashes. X keeps his distance, Zero gets up close. But I think those differences are only the surface. If you really want to understand why these two characters have endured for decades, you have to look beyond their weapons and ask a much deeper question. What do they believe? Because every great hero stands for something, and X and Zero stand for two very different but equally important ways of facing adversity. Let's start with X. One of the things I've always admired about X is that he never loses sight of what he's actually fighting for. He isn't motivated by glory. He isn't chasing recognition. He isn't trying to prove that he's the strongest Reploid in the room. What drives him is something much quieter. He genuinely believes a better future is possible even when war seems endless. Even when trusted allies are lost. Even when the world gives him every reason to become cynical. X continues searching for another path. That doesn't make him naive. It makes him hopeful. And hope is often misunderstood. People sometimes think hope is passive, that is just wishing things will somehow get better. But that's not the kind of hope X represents. His hope requires courage. It means stepping onto a battlefield while still believing that one day there won't need to be battlefields anymore. That's an incredibly difficult thing to hold on to, especially in a world constantly asking him to give it up. That's why I don't see X's compassion as weakness. I see it as one of the greatest strengths any hero can possess, because anyone can keep fighting out of anger, choosing to fight without letting anger define you. That's much harder. Now let's look at Zero, because if X represents hope, Zero represents determination. At first glance, Zero seems like the exact opposite of X. He's decisive, confident, direct. When danger appears, he moves toward it instead of away from it. His fighting style reflects that personality perfectly. Every dash, every saber strike, every aggressive movement tells the player exactly who this character is. But beneath all of that confidence lies something far more complicated. Zero carries burdens that few heroes ever have to face. Without diving into every plot point, much of his journey is about confronting questions of identity, responsibility, and redemption. Can someone overcome the weight of their past? Can they choose who they become? Can they protect others even when they doubt themselves? Those questions give Zero's story emotional depth. His determination isn't simply about refusing to quit. It's about choosing to move forward despite carrying scars that never fully disappear. That's a kind of strength that's deeply human, and it's one of the reasons so many players connect with him. Some people have experienced moments in life where moving forward felt incredibly difficult, where they wished they could rewrite the past, where they questioned whether they were enough. Zero's story reminds us that our past doesn't have to dictate our future. That growth is possible, that redemption is possible. That choosing to do the right thing today matters more than the mistakes that came before. And I think that's a message that resonates far beyond Mega Man. Here's what I find fascinating. On paper, X and Zero couldn't be more different. One leads with empathy, the other leads with resolve. One dreams about the world that could exist. The other protects that dream from falling apart. But notice something important. Neither philosophy works well on its own. Hope without action eventually fades. Determination without hope essentially loses its purpose. X reminds Zero what he's fighting to protect. Zero reminds X that some dreams are preserved because someone is willing to stand between hope and destruction. Neither character completes the story alone. Together, they create balance. And I think that's one of the reasons this partnership stood the test of time. Because they reveal something fundamental about heroism. Real heroes don't all look the same. Some inspire us through compassion. Others inspire us through perseverance. Both are necessary, both are admirable, both deserve to be celebrated. Once you begin to understand that, something else starts to make perfect sense. Their gameplay doesn't just feel different, it reflects who they are. Let's talk about that next. One of my favorite things about Mega Man is that it rarely asks you to separate gameplay from storytelling. In fact, I would argue that some of the best storytelling in the X and Zero series doesn't happen during the cutscenes at all. It happens while you're playing. Every mechanic quietly reinforces who they are. It's hard not to appreciate just how intentional Capcom's design philosophy really is. Starting with X. When you first begin a Mega Man X game, X isn't at his strongest. He doesn't have every special weapon. He doesn't have every armor part. He doesn't have every enhancement available to him. He grows. And I don't think that's accidental. It's symbolic. As players, we're encouraged to explore, to experiment, to take risks, to revisit stages with new abilities, to discover hidden capsules, to learn from our mistakes. Piece by piece. X becomes stronger because of what he experiences. That's remarkably fitting for a character whose greatest strength isn't raw power, it's growth. Dr. Light didn't create X to be the ultimate weapon. He created someone capable of learning, someone capable of making choices, someone capable of becoming better. And that's exactly how the player experiences the game. You're constantly adapting, learning, improving, finding new solutions. Even the special weapons reinforce this philosophy. Every Maverick defeated gives X another tool, another possibility, another way of approaching the next challenge. The game quietly rewards curiosity, creativity, adaptability. Instead of asking, how hard can you hit? The game often asks, how will you solve this problem? That's such an interesting reflection of X's personality. He's thoughtful, flexible, open to change. Now compare that to Zero, especially in the Zero series. The moment you pick up that controller, the experience feels different. You're encouraged to stay close to danger, to react quickly, to learn enemy patterns, to master timing. Every successful slash feels earned. Every dodge demands confidence. Every combo rewards commitment. The games don't simply ask whether you can survive. They ask whether you've mastered your own abilities. That perfectly mirrors Zero's character. He's not constantly searching for new weapons to define him. He refines what he already has. He becomes stronger through discipline, through experience, through relentless determination. Watching an experienced player control Zero is almost mesmerizing. The movement becomes effortless. The combat flows naturally. The player isn't just pressing buttons anymore. They're expressing mastery. And isn't that exactly who Zero is? A warrior whose confidence comes from years of experience. A protector who trusts his own skill because he's earned it. But here's something I think deserves even more appreciation. Neither gameplay style invalidates the other. Instead, they invite different kinds of players to the Mega Man universe. Some players love experimenting. They enjoy finding hidden upgrades. They like discovering the best weapon for every situation. They enjoy gradually becoming more powerful. Those players often gravitate toward X. Others enjoy perfecting difficult mechanics, learning advanced movement, improving execution, chasing higher rankings. Those players often find themselves drawn toward Zero. And neither preference is more correct. They're simply different expressions of what makes action games fun. Different play styles, different ways of experiencing the same universe. Some players want versatility, others want precision. The Mega Man franchise says, why not both? And that's something I genuinely admire, because I think these games respect their players. They don't force everyone to enjoy action in exactly the same way. Instead, they recognize that people connect with challenge differently. Even today, you'll find different discussions about their favorite armor sets, favorite weapons, saber techniques, movement options, because these mechanics don't just make the games enjoyable, they help the players express themselves. And perhaps that's the best compliment I can give Capcom's design. They create a gameplay system that don't just entertain us. They deepen our understanding of the characters that we're controlling. When I play as X, I feel like I'm growing alongside him. When I play as Zero, I feel like I'm relying on everything that I've learned. I don't think neither experiences replaces the other. Like I said, I think they actually complement one another, because these aren't just two heroes sharing the same story. They're two philosophies learning to trust one another, and that's where the relationship becomes truly unforgettable. There's something I always found fascinating about X and Zero. When people talk about them, they almost instinctively say their names together. Not just X, not just Zero, X and Zero.
X and Zero. X and Zero.
X, Zero.
X, Zero. X and Zero. Zero and X.
It's like it became part of the language of the community. And I don't think that's an accident, because while both players are incredible on their own, their greatest strength isn't found in isolation, it's found in their partnership. Throughout gaming history, we've seen countless heroic duos. Some exist because one character needs someone to talk to. Some exist because one character is there for comic relief. X and Zero don't fit neatly into any of those categories. Instead, they represent something much more meaningful: mutual trust. From the very beginning of the X series, it's clear that these two warriors respect one another. Not because they're identical, but because they recognize strengths in each other that they themselves don't possess. X sees in Zero an unwavering resolve. Zero sees in X something equally valuable: a leader who never loses sight of why they're fighting in the first place. Someone whose compassion prevents power from becoming cruelty. One inspires action, the other gives that action purpose. And I think that's a beautiful balance. One of my favorite aspects of the relationship is that it evolves naturally. Trust isn't built overnight, it's earned. Battle after battle, decision after decision, sacrifice after sacrifice. Every challenge they overcome together reinforces something important. Neither of them has to carry the weight of the future alone. Think about how powerful that idea is. For characters constantly surrounded by conflict, having someone you trust completely becomes one of the greatest sources of strength imaginable. That's something players can relate to. Most of us aren't fighting mavericks, but we've all experienced moments where life's challenges felt too heavy to carry by ourselves. Someone who reminds us we don't have to face everything alone. That's what X and Zero become for each other, and that's what separates their partnership from so many others. They're not trying to outshine one another. There's no jealousy, no competition for the spotlight, just respect. And in today's world, I think that's a refreshing message. We're surrounded by conversations that constantly encourage comparison. Who is stronger? Who is smarter? Who is more important? Who is the real hero? But X and Zero quietly reject that mindset. Their stories suggest something different. Sometimes greatness isn't about standing above someone else. Sometimes greatness is about standing beside them. And I believe their partnership has aged so well because so. It reminds us that leadership does not look the same. Sometimes leadership means inspiring hope. Other times it means taking action when everyone else hesitates. Neither role is complete without the other. As the series progresses, both characters continue influencing one another in subtle ways. Without realizing it, they begin shaping each other. Not by changing who they are, but by helping one another become the best version of themselves. And that's usually what the strongest friendships tend to do. They don't erase our differences, they strengthen them. They challenge us, encourage us, ground us, inspire us. When I think about X and Zero, I don't think about two separate legends that share the same timeline. I think about one complete story told through two extraordinary perspectives. And perhaps that's why generations later, this partnership resonates with players around the world. The bond between X and Zero doesn't just define the X era. Instead, I would argue that it defines the emotional heart of Mega Man itself, which raises one final question. If these characters continue inspiring people after all these years, what is it about them that refuses to fade? Let's talk about that one next. What makes me happy a lot is the fact that X and Zero, I mean, aside from the fact that they're really powerful, really stylish, they've starred in some of the most beloved games, even fighting games at that, but even after all this time, people still talk about them. Now let's think about that for a moment. Gaming as a whole has changed dramatically over the years. Entire genres have risen and fallen. Consoles have come and gone, thank you to those who have been preserving them after all these years. And technology has evolved at an incredibly fast pace. And yet somehow these generations past characters are still being brought up and talked about and discussed time and time again to this day. Question is, why? I don't think it's because they're simply nostalgic. If nostalgia was enough, every video game character would have their own active community. But with these two, that's not what we see. The reason X and Zero still inspire people is because their stories actually still mean something. Some players admire X because he reminds them that kindness isn't weakness. Others see themselves in Zero because they understand what it feels like to carry a heavy weight while still choosing to continue forward. Neither interpretation is essentially wrong, but that's the beauty of great storytelling. At the end of the day, it grows with the audience. One of my favorite parts about being in the Mega Man community is actually seeing how these people tend to celebrate these characters in many different ways. Some people create breathtaking artwork that captures moments the games could only hint at. Others compose incredible musical arrangements that breathe new life into themes we've loved for years. Some dedicate themselves to mastering speedruns, discovering strategies that most of us never would have imagined. Others organize tournaments and challenge runs that encourage players to test their skills while bringing people together. Cosplayers spend countless hours recreating these iconic heroes with astonishing attention to detail. Every single one of these contributions says the exact same thing. This story mattered to me. And I think that's a beautiful feeling because communities are not just built on the games alone. They are literally built by the people, by the players, by the fans, by us. The people who consume what they have been giving us. People who are willing to share their excitement. People who are answering questions for newcomers. People who celebrate each other's achievements. People who keep conversations alive way after the credits are done rolling. And believe it or not, all of those reasons are why the Mega Man community has endured for this long. Not because everyone agrees on everything, because we definitely don't. But if you go and ask 10 fans where someone should start with Mega Man, you're gonna end up getting 10 different answers. If you ask whether X or Zero is their favorite, you're gonna go ahead and get passionate arguments from both sides. If you wanna go deeper down the rabbit hole, ask someone to rank every series. Prepare yourself when you do though. But underneath all of those debates, there is something that is much more important. A shared appreciation, no matter what the series brought you here. At the end of the day, we're all still celebrating the same franchise. We're all connected by stories that challenged us, music that inspired us, boss fights that tested our patience, and characters that have stayed with us even after we put the controller down. It's something admirable about the community is its willingness to welcome in new players who have either never heard of the name at all whatsoever. They've never stumbled across it, but they're wanting to know more about it. And the community has usually been consistent with bringing them in and not overflowing them with a whole bunch, but giving them enough to where they know where they should begin. If someone were to ask, where should I start? One, go watch my video of where I break down each of the series and tell you which one you should start. Other than that, people don't necessarily respond to that question by saying, oh, you've got 30 years of games to catch up on. Instead, they just go ahead and start recommending their favorites. Even with each series, they don't tell you, oh, start the X series, but start from X1. I would be the person to tell you to start from X4 from the get-go. We tend to explain why certain games mean so much to us by sharing tips, sharing memories, sharing the overall excitement, because every longtime fan remembered what it felt like to play a Mega Man game for the very first time. And there's something genuinely special about helping someone else feel that same feeling the same way we did for the first time. Like when I go back and look at what the community has created over the years, I don't just see people celebrating a simple video game. I see people keeping a legacy alive, because characters like X and Zero don't just remain legendary on their own. It's through us. They remain legendary because generation after generations tend to keep telling their stories. Every conversation, every stream, piece of art, speed runs, challenge runs, conventions. 20XX is actually, going to have a convention sometime soon, and through sheer love of this franchise and with the community coming together, we've helped fund and, helping them being able to have the access to even have that convention of their own just to celebrate Mega Man. Together, they ensure that someone, somewhere, will discover Mega Man tomorrow, in the same way that many of us have discovered it years ago. And maybe that's the greatest legacy that X and Zero could ever have. Not just simply by being remembered, but continuing to inspire people that they've never met. They don't know we exist. And that brings me to just one final thought. If these two heroes still have the power to inspire new players today, then what can they still teach us? One of the questions I hear fairly often is, if I've never played a single Mega Man game before, why should I start now? That's a fair question. There are thousands of games that are constantly competing for our attention. So why should somebody go back and play something that came out years, even decades ago? Again, for me, it wasn't necessarily about nostalgia. Sometimes it is, but it's more so about the storytelling. Great stories, they don't stop being meaningful because they get older. They remain meaningful because the ideas they explore continue to resonate with new generations, which is exactly why X and Zero still connect with people today, starting with X. As I said before, one of the most inspiring things about X isn't that he's fearless, it's that he chooses compassion in a world that constantly challenges it. Think about the situations he's placed in. He's surrounded by conflict, he's forced to make impossible decisions, he witnesses loss. He carries responsibilities that would overwhelm almost anyone. And yet, he never allows those experiences to erase his humanity. He never stops believing that people and Reploids can choose a better future. That's a lesson that extends far beyond Mega Man. We live in a world where it's often easier to become cynical than hopeful. It's easier to assume nothing will change. It's easier to believe that kindness won't make a difference. X quietly pushes back against that way of thinking. He reminds us that hope isn't about pretending everything is okay. Hope is making the choice to believe that tomorrow can be better, even when today is difficult. That's a powerful message. Now, let's think about Zero. If X teaches us to believe in a better future, Zero teaches us that our past does not have to decide who we become. So many people connect with Zero because they see that his journey is not built on perfection. As mentioned before, it's built on perseverance. He makes difficult choices. He carries burdens. He faces questions about identity, purpose, and responsibility. Yet he never stops moving forward, not because the path is easy, but because protecting others matters more than his own comfort. I think that's something many of us can relate to. We've all made mistakes. We've all doubted ourselves. We've all wondered if we were even capable of becoming the person that we want to be. Zero's story reminds us that growth isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing what to do next. Every day gives us a new opportunity to move forward, and that's what makes his story more inspiring. But here's something I find a bit more meaningful. Neither X or Zero has all the answers. They grow, they struggle, they question themselves, they lean on one another. And that's important, because real strength isn't knowing everything. Real strength is continuing to learn, continuing to listen, continuing to grow. Maybe not because we fought Mavericks, but because we've all experienced uncertainty. We've all faced moments where we wondered if we were enough. We've all had days where moving forward felt harder than standing still. And yet, like X and like Zero, we keep moving. That thought alone is one of the quiet themes running through the Mega Man series. Progress doesn't always happen in giant leaps. Sometimes it happens literally one decision at a time. There's a reason why these games continue to find new audiences. They're not simply exciting action games. They're stories about resilience, about responsibility, about believing that your choices matter. If you're someone who's never experienced Mega Man before, my advice is simple. Don't worry about becoming an expert. Don't worry about knowing every piece of lore. Don't even worry about playing perfectly. Just start. Choose a game that sparks your curiosity. Experience the world through X's eyes. Walk alongside Zero on his journey. Allow yourself to discover what millions of players have loved for decades. In one of these series, Classic X, Legends, doesn't matter. There is something special waiting for you. At some point, maybe you'll fall in love with the gameplay, or the music, or the character design. It's going to be something. By the end of the day, once you spend enough time with X and Zero, you'll realize that they're not just heroes fighting just to save the world. They are reminding us that courage is not the absence of fear, and determination is about never falling. It's about choosing to stand back up again and again and again and again and again. This franchise continues to welcome new players because they're inviting us to believe that we too can also grow, that we too can also keep moving forward. And that leaves me with just one final chapter. When we step back and look at everything that X and Zero have accomplished, not just in their own stories, but across the history of gaming, what kind of legacy have they truly left behind? Stick around and let's finish this journey together. When people talk about legendary characters, often you'll hear numbers in the conversation. How many games did they appear in? How many copies did such games sell? I mean, which are interesting questions regarding, but those don't typically define a legacy because popularity can fade and sales records can be broken. Technology non-stop continues to evolve. Every generation introduces new heroes for players to discover. A true legacy isn't measured by success. It's measured by what continues to matter even long after the moment has passed. I mean, X and Zero have earned their place among greatest heroes in gaming. The ideas they represent continue to resonate. Think about everything that we've just explored throughout this journey in this video. We continue to move forward into tomorrow while carrying the weight of yesterday. I mean, they're not just themes or ideas that just people think that they belong in a video game. No, this is just something that people tend to hold on to in their everyday life. Not just X and Zero, but other characters from other franchises and games as well have always taught us something and not just simply entertained us. It's that we all have the opportunity to become the better version of ourselves. When someone finishes a Mega Man game, they might remember that incredible boss fight. They might remember that one soundtrack that sticks with them for years on end. They're gonna remember finally overcoming a very difficult point in the game that seemed impossible, but they did it. I mean, even years later, what often stays with us longer is the feeling that those experiences have created. Those emotions become part of us. That's what stories do when they're told very well. They stop feeling like fiction and then they become memories. And memories become part of who we are. And again, after all these years coming back to these games, whether it's any series, I don't think the question has necessarily been who is the better hero. The better question to ask yourself is, what would Mega Man be like if one or the other did not exist? Because when you really think about it, there really isn't an actual satisfying answer to that. You take out X, the franchise loses its heart. You take out Zero and the franchise loses its resolve. The Mega Man universe just needs both. So if someone asks me whether I think X or Zero is the better legend, my answer is simple. I don't choose, because I don't think Capcom really intended us to actually choose one over the other. I think they actually wanted us to see that greatness can take more than just one form. Because both of them leave such a long-lasting impact, both deserve that respect. That's the real legacy of X and Zero. And if that message continues to inspire people 30, 50 years from now, just as it inspired us today, then I think it's safe to say that X and Zero won't be remembered simply just as legend. They'll continue creating new ones. If you've made it to the end of this journey with me, thank you. Whether you are a long-time veteran of Mega Man or this is your first time here, either way, I am glad that you are here and we're all growing together. And now I'd like to hear from you. When you think of X and Zero, what exactly do they represent to you? Did one inspire you more when you were younger, only for the other to resonate later in life? If someone you know has never even heard of Mega Man, but you want to get them into this series, which game would you recommend them first? And once that's all said and done, at the end of the day, it's still honoring the conversation and honoring the community. And above all, the two heroes who remind us that the strongest future is built when optimism and tenacity move forward together. Until next time, keep moving forward.